Trump's big outreach to Hindus. Angry Trump points at Bangladesh. Opportunist Trump needs Desi vote. But he exposes persecution deniers. It's a Diwali dhamaka for American Desis. The big focus on 5 Live.
So why is an opportunist like Trump suddenly speaking for Hindus in Bangladesh? I'm going to get into that issue and answer some uncomfortable questions here on 5 Live. Wishing all of our viewers in India and across the world a very, very happy Diwali. We hope you had a good one. Donald Trump's statement on social media highlighting the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh and other minorities has created huge ripples beyond just social media. Well, there's no doubt, viewer, that Trump's words are clearly aligned with his bid to opportunistically court the Indian-American vote as the US election cycle heats up. But it also holds greater significance that cannot be ignored. By raising the issue of the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh publicly, Trump has embarrassed a near worldwide silence about what minority Hindus and others have been facing ever since the military-supported Muhammad Yunus government was installed in Dhaka. Please note, I don't say came to power, I say was installed in Dhaka. Well, Trump has his own selfish electoral reasons, but what Trump has done is bring the plight of Bangladeshi Hindus into mainstream global international discourse, becoming only the second world leader after India's own Prime Minister Narendra Modi to do so. Well, this move has inadvertently put pressure on other world leaders, many of whom have maintained either a total silence or issued meaningless, woolly, broad banalities about tensions in Bangladesh. The issue of religious minorities facing persecution in Bangladesh has become the continuing subject of a near total suppression by the international media, foreign governments, human rights organizations and activists, fact-checkers, even the Indian opposition, which has completely refused to acknowledge it, all keen to ensure an unblemished few months at least for the new Yunus government in Bangladesh, despite unignorable evidence of persecution. Whether it was discrimination during flood relief in Bangladesh or shocking anti-Hindu rules during Durga Puja, to an unending litany of incidents in the hinterland of Bangladesh. The Muhammad Yunus government had counted on a global, agenda-driven conspiracy of silence to navigate at least his first year in office. Well, if Modi's repeated raising of this issue broke this silence, Trump's statement now smashes that silence that has surrounded these cases of violence, harassment, and social marginalization faced by Bangladeshi Hindus and explained away as a backlash against the Awami League by the Muhammad Yunus government. Even now, as we speak, that group, Sheikh Hasina's Awami League, has been banned from participating in any elections in Bangladesh. So much for freedom and democracy in that country. Well, this silence over the persecution of minority Hindus and others in Bangladesh from global leaders has often been interpreted as a tacit denial of the situation, suggesting an unwillingness to intervene or speak up. In contrast, Trump's decision to spotlight the persecution subtly implies that these instances of violence are not isolated or exaggerated, but rather serious enough to warrant international attention. Now, one is very tempted to dismiss Trump as a cartoonish opportunist, simply stirring the pot for Indian votes in the election season, which is all completely true, as a matter of fact. Or you can also acknowledge that, cartoonery aside, Trump has been US president and could very well be US president again after this election. And therefore, his words cannot simply be sidestepped and dismissed. I know what you're thinking. Trump's message is undeniably politically motivated, aimed at resonating with the sizable and influential Indian American community, particularly those who feel strongly about Hindu rights worldwide. This demographic has been growing in its political involvement and has increasingly rallied around candidates who address their concerns about Hindu issues abroad. His statement may therefore be seen as a calculated maneuver designed by Trump to foster affinity with Indian American voters, a group that played a notable role in the last election cycle and could prove crucial in closely contested states where things go down to the wire. Yet the strategic timing does not diminish the broader implications, I humbly submit. By speaking out, Trump has exposed the hypocrisy or reluctance of other leaders, including the current US leaders, who, despite championing human rights in general, have avoided condemning these targeted persecutions of minority Hindus and other communities in Bangladesh. This silence from the global leadership may stem from various factors: geopolitical alliances, complicity in what has happened as far as the regime change in Bangladesh is concerned, diplomatic sensitivities, or simply the prioritization of economic relations over human rights issues. In India's case, the opposition's silence is explained by the fact that Sheikh Hasina, the leader in Bangladesh who was bundled out, was seen to be close to Prime Minister Modi, and therefore domestic political compulsions meant that the Congress party, Rahul Gandhi, and a litany of others stayed a long time before they actually had anything to say about the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh. However, Trump's tweet, regardless of its intent, has opened a conversation that simply cannot be easily dismissed.
Donald Trump wades into the Bangladesh communal tension issue in his Diwali message. The Republican nominee condemned barbaric violence against Hindus and other minorities in Bangladesh and criticized US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for their handling of the situation. Trump accused Harris, his Democratic presidential rival, and Biden of ignoring Hindus worldwide and in the United States. He promised that under his administration he would protect Hindu Americans from the quote-unquote anti-religion agenda of the radical left. The statement comes amidst targeting of Hindus in Bangladesh after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina from power, an issue that has largely drawn silence from world leaders apart from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In July and August, several members of the Hindu community in Bangladesh were assaulted and their properties and shops were vandalized by mobs. Reaching out to Indian American voters, since this is, after all, election season, Trump pledged to strengthen ties with India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi if re-elected. The BJP and VHP have welcomed the message from Donald Trump.
एक बड़ी अजीब विचित्र विडंबना है देश की और दुनिया की कि जब हिंदुओं के ऊपर हमले होते हैं, हिंदुओं को सताया जाता है, तो न सिर्फ बाकी वर्ल्ड लीडर्स जो है ना चुप्पी साध लेते हैं, अपितु साथ ही साथ उस ऑपरेशन को ऑपरेशन नहीं माना जाता, उसको उत्पीड़न को उत्पीड़न नहीं माना जाता, ऐसी खबरों को छुपाया भी जाता है. तो ये स्वागत कदम है.
नरेंद्र मोदी दुनिया के पहले ऐसे ग्लोबल लीडर थे जिन्होंने बांग्लादेशी हिंदुओं पर हो रही रिलीजियस एट्रोसिटीज के खिलाफ खुलकर बोला था, और उनके कॉल के बाद वर्ल्ड लीडर्स इस पर बोलना शुरू हो चुके हैं. वेयर एज डोमेस्टिकली our vote bank politicians of India Alliance, in particular Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Vadra, are absolutely silent.
Kamala Harris has also shared her Diwali greetings. In a video posted on social media, Harris wished everyone celebrating the Festival of Lights, which marks the victory of good over evil. Bureau Report, India Today.
But why, right before the elections, has Trump appeared to be pandering to Hindus specifically? Not Indians, but Hindus specifically. Well, here are some reasons that we can use to explain this. There's a significantly expanded Indian demographic in several key states like Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. There's a high Indian engagement in US polls, as much as 70% turnout in 2020. Sincere American Desis going out to vote. 75% Indian voter turnout projected in this upcoming poll, so much more than the last time, 71%. Immigration, healthcare, and economic policy issues are very key poll issues on which Indians vote in the United States. There is a bid to swing South Asian voters backing the Indian American Kamala Harris. So all of this is a very, very considered decision by Donald Trump. This isn't necessarily, something that comes out of a sense of ethics or a sense of sensitivity. This is very much about the elections, but it also sends out a larger message. Joining me on the show today, we have Rohit Sharma, our man on the ground in the United States, who's been fronting our coverage. Gaurav Sawant is also with me. He will be in the United States very soon to track the US election coverage. Rami Desai is a columnist, distinguished fellow with the India Foundation, and someone who's written and commented extensively on the issue of Hindus in Bangladesh and the persecution. Rami, I'm going to come to you right after I get a quick word from both Gaurav and Rohit. Rohit, to you first. Were you surprised by what Trump said? It was a pretty long statement, but, like the points that I've just read out, would you like to add some more?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the fact is, usually we get a tweet that says Happy Diwali, to all Indian and all South Asians and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't usually see that long of a message, from anybody. And so it definitely came as a surprise and also a welcome surprise to a lot of Hindu and Indian Americans who've been talking about this issue. Remember, there were protests, widespread protests in America from Washington, D.C. all the way to California. When the government changed in Bangladesh, people were talking about these atrocities committed against Hindus in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And NRIs were riled up and they were demanding the State Department to do something and Biden administration to come out and condemn those attacks. And that did not happen. So I think, there obviously is a sense of, yes, this could be an opportunity by Donald Trump to, reach out to Hindu Americans and Indians. But the fact of the matter is that, if you look at the entire tweet, he's hit all the points that we've been covering on this campaign, especially when it comes to Indian Americans. He talks about his friendship with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He talks about temples that get vandalized. He talks about how he would be protecting Hindu Americans in America, a very, very big issue that Hindu Americans have been actually coming on the Capitol Hill and be talking about it and trying to lobby for it. And the very fact that a lot of these same Indian Americans can swing vote in those key states, plus North Carolina, Shiv, I think that makes it very, very interesting 3 days before the election.
So 75% expected voter turnout, of Indian Americans, Gaurav, in this upcoming election in the United States means, that there is a very real data-based reason for, Trump's outreach to Hindus in particular. What are you making of this? Because apart from the outreach to a community, he did mention relations with India, obviously, hinting at the fact that there has been friction between India and the United States under the Biden administration, something he says he wants to repair, Gaurav.
And that indeed has been. Shiv, you and I have tracked India-America relations. If we were just to take about how they've been on a high and a higher trajectory post the 1998 Pokhran test and then interaction between then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Bill Clinton, and then ever since, George Bush and Dr. Manmohan Singh, Barack Obama and Narendra Modi, then again, with post-Barack Obama, with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has actually tried to make a real effort to try to woo the Indian American voters who are traditionally seen as those who vote for the Democrats. When I was covering Howdy Modi at Houston, and there was a big outreach to the Indian American voter to try out the Republicans, to try out, his policies, the Diwali parties that became big at Trump Tower. That's something that was a very considered opinion of his, to reach out to the Hindu Americans. And this attack on Hindus in Bangladesh has been a hot trigger issue, because this has actually upset Hindus across the world. The targeting of Hindus in Bangladesh, the silence of the Biden administration, the alleged complicity in a regime change, all of these are very serious issues. And the targeting of Hindus, targeting of temples, that continues every day, Shiv. Whether it's in schools or colleges or in universities where Hindu professors are being targeted, in police stations where Hindu officials are being targeted. The Indian embassy had to send back staff from Bangladesh, and that just goes on to show that it's not, under the garb of a so-called students movement, there was actually radical Islamists who were taking control of Bangladesh. So he's hit on an issue that's tracking with Hindus across the world. Will it pay dividends? We'll have to wait and watch for the next couple of days, Shiv.
Only a few days to go before we get to see what the impact of that comment will be. Rohit and Gaurav, keep tracking this unfolding story. I will keep connecting with you. Thanks, gentlemen, for the moment. Rami Desai, welcome. Thank you for your time here on India Today. You know, the statement by Donald Trump can easily be explained away, Rami, as opportunism during elections, an outreach on a sensitive issue that has largely been ignored by the Biden administration. But there is, of course, a larger message as well, and it's not entirely devoid, of many things that people have been concerned about. Your initial reading of what Trump said, Rami.
Good evening, Shiv. I think the three of you have done a really good job in really putting this together. But let me say this right at the outset. I think the hypocrisy of what we have seen as the aftermath of this post-regime change in Bangladesh is nothing but staggering, not just to us in India, but across the world. I think it's almost like the US has exposed themselves. Not only was the US accused of interfering in Bangladesh's internal matters, Shiv, but it laid bare to the world to see that the US has shunned complete responsibility. You know, it was just between August 4th and 9th. Forget the rest of the days that we saw over 1,000 incidents of communal violence, yet not a word. Shiv, the other point is that considering during Sheikh Hasina's regime, the US Ambassador Haas in Bangladesh, made several visits to the Election Commission. There were several sanctions, not just to the RAB. There were sanctions to leadership of Bangladesh. There has been no action, no reaction against what we have seen happening. And like Gaurav said, you know, there's been attacks on Durga Puja pandals, there have been attacks on minorities, there have been attacks on the idols themselves, there have been alleged atrocities against women, but we haven't heard a word. But Shiv, why do we call what Trump has said as politics? Because I think the real politics that was played was by the Biden-Harris administration. You see, it was during the Modi-Biden talks that we saw this complete bluff being played out. The Indian readout mentioned that Prime Minister Modi Biden expressed their shared concern over the situation in Bangladesh. But did the American readout express that? No, it only focused on the Ukraine-Russia war. Correct. Number two, when we talk about this sort of complete blackout of the atrocities against Hindus in Bangladesh or anywhere else in the world, the fact remains that the rise of this sort of hatred against Hindus, this sort of the way Hindus are treated or Hinduphobia is very evident, considering it was the Democratic Congressman Shri Thanedar who took out the resolution 1131 blasting the government for being sort of complicit with the rise of Hinduphobia in the US. So nevertheless, Shiv, you know, while we think that Trump's statements are politically motivated, I think for people like me who've been observing what has been happening in Bangladesh, and not just in Bangladesh, even if you look at in Myanmar, the kind of politics that is geopolitics that is being played out there by the US makes it seem like that the Biden-Harris dispensation was playing politics. They had certain actors to please, and they definitely were not on the side of India or on the side of Hindus.
Rami, my second question to you is, you've painted a very clear picture about the persuasions and the inclinations of the Biden administration. What explains this apparent conspiracy of silence by virtually every other world leader as well? Did they all just fall in line, considering that the United States wasn't talking about it? But, you know, I literally cannot think of anyone apart from, Prime Minister Modi and now Donald Trump having explicitly, you know, without broad generalities, talking about the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh. How does one explain that, this kind of global silence about it?
Shiv, the reason I smile is because it is so obvious, you know, that you take, you follow, the US, you know, and what US's stance on the situation is. Now, for US to accept that there has been this sort of a backlash against minorities when the world was warning them about it. You know, people like me who observe these regions for the last 2 years have been saying that there is going to be a huge backlash if the Sheikh Hasina government is, forcefully changed, if there's a regime change, if there's international interference, because it is the radical groups that are dying to come up, and no country in the world is going to be able to control them. Having said that, yes, other countries took cue, and the reason they took cue is because the US decided to stay mum, and the reason the US decided to stay mum is because they don't want to take responsibility of what they have been fairly and squarely accused of. And this has happened many times before, Shiv, and I will say this as an analyst on this region, Bangladesh is not the only country that this is going to happen in, and we are going to see a backlash in our neighborhood. I think the next country we should be really closely watching is Myanmar, by the statements of its own American newspapers. It is today called the sacrifice road. So I think this is sort of, a repeat offense wherein the US thinks it can come and control radical elements, and it has never been able to do that. We just need to take a look at our northwestern frontier.
My final question, Rami, then is this: there are many different threads to what the the ex-US president said in that social media post. There's one aspect is, like we discussed, the political aspect pertaining to the elections. The other pertains to the deep state India-US relations. How should India strategize? How should India read this and plan its next step? There are uncertainties afoot. Donald Trump could well be the next president. We'll know that over the next few days. So there must be an air of what next, and how do we use this as far as India is concerned?
I think, Shiv, that's a very good question, and something that deserves longer observation and discussion on. But the fact remains that as long as you have a politician that is making the right sounds, that is their job. And if Trump is making the right sounds against people who have been completely forgotten, the damage that has been done to a community completely forgotten, if he is making the right sounds to bring them back into focus, I think that's a good job done. However, India has a lot on its hands. We already know the state of our northwestern frontier. We need to be very aware of what is happening on our northeastern frontier, which of course includes the Bay of Bengal as well, Shiv. The reason being that India has large porous borders. These states in these areas, including West Bengal, have already had an illegal immigration problem, which has caused internal strife that you are very aware of. Any sort of disturbances on these areas will cause further damage to our internal security and put us in a far more precarious position than we see right now. I have been a strong believer of strengthening minority communities in our neighborhood because that is the right thing to do and that is where they belong. And the fact that they are not being given that safety and security should be put up in every major international organization, human rights organization, however lopsided they may be. If they can have interference in an area like Manipur, which they know nothing about, they surely can bring themselves to comment on larger issues like Bangladesh. Shiv, I think India has its job cut out. I think we'll have to come and see, 3 days later, come and take a stock of who is the new president in the United States. It will make a big difference to us. But having said that, we need to start strengthening our minority communities, strengthening our borders, putting certain bilaterals in place, which doesn't necessarily mean government to government, but maybe 1.5 level bilaterals to create some amount of understanding amongst policymakers, scholars, writers, and observers.
Rami Desai, it's been a pleasure speaking to you and look forward to bringing you back on the show a few days from now when there's more clarity from the United States and going forward as well. Pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shiv.
And meanwhile, the ISKCON has praised Donald Trump for his support to Bangladeshi Hindus and the persecution that is taking place there. Here's a look in this conversation with India Today's Surya Agni Roy.
वी आर वेरी ग्रेटफुल, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद डोनाल्ड ट्रंप जी का। हम देख रहे हैं कि लास्ट 70-80 दिनों से किस तरह जो तांडव चल रहा है हिंदुओं के विरुद्ध में बांग्लादेश में हो रहा है। लेकिन सबसे ज्यादा जो चीज दुखी करती है कि जितने भी वर्ल्ड लीडर्स हैं सबके मुंह में ताला लग गया है। तो ये बहुत ही दुखद है। हमने देखा कि किस तरह जब बराक ओबामा अमेरिकन प्रेसिडेंट थे और वो आए थे भारत में, और उस समय किसी चर्च में किसी लोगों ने कोई पत्थर फेंका था, उनका शीशा टूट गया था और बराक ओबामा ने उसको नरेंद्र मोदी के सामने उठाया कि भारत में माइनॉरिटी सेफ नहीं है। एक कांच टूटने को लेके उन्होंने इतना बड़ा मुद्दा उठाया। लेकिन वही हम देखते हैं कि जब बांग्लादेशी हिंदुओं के ऊपर में इतना अत्याचार हो रहा है।
क्या इस्कॉन अपने जो समर्थक हैं, अपने जो डिवोटीज हैं, उनको कहेंगे कि हिंदुओं के वेलफेयर के लिए डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को, वो जो अमेरिकन हिंदूज हैं, उनको डोनाल्ड ट्रंप के खिलाफ, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को वोट देना चाहिए?
इस्कॉन किसी भी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को सपोर्ट नहीं करती है। मैं जो बात बता रहा हूँ कि किसी ने बांग्लादेशी हिंदुओं के पक्ष में बात रखी, तो मैं उस बेसिस में मैं बता रहा हूँ कि आई रियली अप्रिशिएट हिम। ऑफ कोर्स हम लोग पर्सनल लेवल में तो हम लोग का ओपिनियन रहता ही है, लेकिन इस्कॉन इज अ पॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एकदम नहीं होता है।